Gosh. Should we do it this way? Oh my god, my hair looks insane. Oh no. Okay. And then trying to make it look normal. Should I sit on the floor? This is like very. Oh, you can see my laundry. Oh, brother. Let's do it like this. This is very, humble. Here we go. I am actually very tired because I just uploaded a new video on the archive called How the United States Became the World's Biggest Empire. And so I've been editing that video all day and then doing like the timestamps and creating the thumbnail. And so my energy has been sapped by that process. So I'm hoping that you guys enjoy the video. And today, I wanted to do a kind of continuation of the conversation that we were having last time regarding voting and, just the political and economic state of the United States right now. I got a really interesting comment on that live that I wanted to kind of go through and address. I'm just going to pull it up. It was a really thoughtful comment. I really appreciate people doing kind of lengthy paragraphs that really go into what we're talking about. So I wanted to kind of highlight that and give some responses. So I'm just going to pull that up right now. That live stream, if you didn't catch it, is still up because I actually discovered that you cannot paywall the live streams until you have monetization on YouTube. I thought that I could paywall them by making them members only, but I don't believe I can actually have the members only option until I have monetization on YouTube. So there's that. But this is the comment. I'm not going to screen share it because I tried to screen share last time and it not only did it not work, but it was just a black screen. So we're done with that. I just want to see the comments on this video. Okay, yes. So the commenter was Khalil G2242. Thank you, Khalil G, for your comment. They said, I really enjoyed this live, but caught it late. It's always refreshing to hear views I don't necessarily agree with and get to see the perspective and approach of other people. Here are some thoughts I had while listening to you. Then the first point here is, when was the last time the Democratic nominee was actually chosen in a fair and honest way that no one could question? Was this year the first time they just gave it to someone? This is interesting because I think that, fair is an interesting way to describe the process for picking the Democratic nominee. I mean, if we remember back in 2016, the kind of maneuvers that the Democratic Party did to try to silence and sideline Bernie Sanders, they do things that are just barely legal to try to get anybody off the ballot that they don't like. Like their efforts, for example, this year with trying to kind of sideline Jill Stein. I mean, I don't necessarily um, support Jill Stein, but it is interesting to see that they actually dedicated themselves to having a political ad specifically targeting Jill Stein, saying that she was like a kind of, agent, I suppose, of Russia. There's just these accusations that are interesting, like that the Democrats will kind of focus on that. So I don't think that the process of picking the candidate is necessarily free and fair, but this is the process that we have. And I think that in the case of, Joe Biden resigning. I know a lot of people thought that if there was an open convention, it would be pure chaos, and also it would limit the amount of time that Kamala had to kind of consolidate the base and all of the donors and such. So they kind of did that in a remarkable amount of time, which it led very little room for dissent of any kind. So that's what I'll say about that. And then this person commented, local elections require actual hard work, dedication, heart, and studying. The federal presidential election is based off of months and maybe even years of consuming rhetoric from different media sources that influence our position on this one part of the entire government process. It's the Super Bowl. Even people who don't watch football all year tap in for that game. Yes. Yes, I would have to agree with that. I think that it's evident in the voter turnout differences between the national election and the local election that a lot of people only tune into politics when there's a presidential election happening. I actually worked the polls for the local election, and the demographic there skews very aged. And so hopefully when I work the polls this year, it will be much more diverse. It's ironic. The Democrats think the other side is super unified, and the Republicans think that the Democrats are super unified. Neither is true, though I will say both sides are incredible actors. I tend to fall on the side that I do think that the Republicans are very unified. Because listen, the kind of discourse that happens within the Democratic Party about the nature of our candidate. So the fighting, the infighting that happens between people who claim to be leftists and people who claim to be liberals regarding Kamala Harris, I don't see that amount of dissent in the Republican Party. Yes, there are Republicans that do not support Donald Trump. Those people more or less fall in line when the election comes. The Democrats that don't support Kamala Harris, or the people that would be Democrats that don't support Kamala Harris, they are not going to vote for her uh, come November. And so I do think that, and my personal theory on this is that listen, I have to think about how I want to phrase this, but Democrats, right? The Republican Party as it is right now is full of groupthink. And Democrats, there's definitely that aspect with the blue MAGA people and the vote blue no matter who kind of ideology. But I do think that critical thinking is more prevalent in the Democratic Party. And so people will be critical of their own candidate. Whereas at large, the Republican Party has become Donald Trump's party in the last, 4 to 8 years. So that's what I have on that. And then let's see. Both sides completely support Israel at all times and in all cases, despite there being absolutely no treaty on the books that I know of with that nation. I feel like this is sadly all connected to the fairy tales regarding Abraham and what that has done to the planet in the past 600 ish years. Well, yes, it's definitely the case that support for Israel in the United States is bipartisan, meaning that both the Democrats and the Republicans support Israel, and they actually argue sometimes over who supports Israel more. I think that that is due to the Zionist lobby and its influence. I think it's due to different super PACs that fund these people's careers, like APAC, that make sure that there cannot be anybody who has dissenting views on Israel. It has been sad to see that the squad, the group of progressives in Congress involving, like, for example, AOC, Ilhan Omar. It's sad to see that they've been getting kind of picked off one by one. And some of the reason being that APAC has put in so much effort into funding opposition towards them. I think that I want to say the same thing happened to Cori Bush, um, and a little as well towards Jamal Bowman. So that definitely is an unfortunate aspect. I think that that's that's probably the reason for that. Part of the reason for that bipartisan support. The Supreme Court only gets packed based on timing. Trump just happened to be in office at the right time to get 2 to 3 justices in. I would say the bigger issue is the nature of the Supreme Court in general, not like it's been some bastion of truth and justice throughout history. That's an interesting point. I think that I wonder with the packing the Supreme Court, Donald Trump picked his last Supreme Court justice, if I remember correctly, like not even a month before the election was supposed to happen. So many implored him that he should wait until the election, and then if he was elected, then he should nominate and push through. But he pushed through his Supreme Court nomination anyway. And people say that, oh, it doesn't matter because, Ruth Bader Ginsburg should have stepped down and then, whatever, whatever. So this is just kind of, I mean, where we are at this particular moment. I think the issues with the nature of the Supreme Court, yeah, are interesting. I will say that for the miss the beginning, what are we talking about? We're going through a comment that I got on the first live that I did about the election of 2024. And right now we're talking about the Supreme Court and the nature of the Supreme Court. And I was just about to say that I personally believe that one of the reasons that, despite qualms that I have with the Harris administration, I'm still voting for the Harris Waltz ticket in November is because of the Supreme Court. Because I think that, for people who say that there are really no differences between the Democratic and Republican parties, we can point to kind of the repeal of Roe v. Wade and the fact that that has led directly to the deaths of several women in the United States, like the woman in Georgia. And so I think, like, if only for that reason, that if, we have another Trump presidency, we might have a Republican or a conservative Supreme Court for the next 60 years and all the damage that that can do. I think for that reason, for me, that's a good enough argument to vote for the blue ticket. Although I will say that I think that Democrats are definitely using that to their advantage. The fact that they can kind of just campaign currently on Roe and not offer anything. The more progressive aspects of the Democratic platform seem to be going, leaving one by one, basically. I was also surprised to see that clip of Kamala Harris when the interviewer asked her something to the effect of, do you believe that children should have access to gender affirming care? And I don't know if you guys saw her response on that, but she danced around the question so much. She was like, I think we should follow the law. Okay. I don't think that answers the question. I will say I see Republicans commenting on clips of Kamala Harris all the time saying that basically she never answers the question. And I hate to have to agree with a conservative, but that is so true. It's like when she's asked a direct question, somehow she'll find a way. I mean, that's just politician speak, but like she'll find a way to not answer it. Same thing with she was asked whether or not she thought that the war in Gaza could hurt her chances of being elected. And instead of addressing that and saying yes or no, she responded that, well, first, the most tragic thing that happened was October 7th. And, we know that APAC gives people lines, like lines to actually say and kind of talking points. And if you want to learn more about that, I did a video about it, but also you can just read the US and the Israel Lobby by Mearsheimer, the realist. Very good read that kind of explains all of the tactics that they use to be able to maintain control of our Congress, hold our Congress hostage, basically. And I think that that line, the first and most tragic thing to happen was October 7th. That sounds like an APAC sponsored line. Honestly, it does. Because it doesn't even make sense at face value. Because the question is about the death and the mass murder of Palestinians, of 40,000 Palestinians. And you're talking about the 1,000 or so Israelis that died or that were killed um, by Hamas. I'm saying that that's the first and most tragic. So even by saying that, it's like, are you saying that an Israeli life is worth more than a Palestinian life because 1,000 or so Israelis died, but 40,000 Palestinians died? Is that not tragic? So sometimes I get kind of frustrated listening to her responses on these things, but what can you do? Let's see the next. A major purpose of the two party system is to project to people exactly what their interests are, or at least what they should be. Beyond communication issues, the left and the right don't need to try and understand each other because each side has a corporation masquerading as the voice of the people and telling the whole world what the beliefs of those citizens are through these magical screens. Okay, I think I see what you're saying here. A major purpose of the two party system is to project to people exactly what their interests are, or at least what they should be. I mean, I do think that in a way, both parties, kind of participate in the changing of the Overton window. So, for example, it seems like trans rights is being kicked to the curb. Um, and, it seems like we're going further right on things like immigration and gun control. So, in that way, yeah, I think that, both of the parties kind of help set what is even acceptable to discuss. When you say beyond communication issues, the left and the right don't need to try to understand each other because each side has a corporation masquerading as the voice of the people. I think that this is kind of like the what is it, like two wings, one bird kind of thing. Like basically, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are more similar than they are different. When I say that there are differences between the Democratic and the Republican Party, I just want to be clear that I'm not saying that the differences are huge. In fact, sometimes you have to look. I'm just saying that on either side there are people that say that they're exactly the same and people that say that they're radically different, and I'm kind of just saying that I think that there are some differences, but it's true that both of the parties kind of work in the interest of the ruling class. So there's that. Then you say, I would argue next to 0% of current elected officials have the qualifications to be running our lives on any level because next to none, if not none, of them have a track record of actually doing what they are supposed to do for the people in the respective states they are elected from. It defeats the entire purpose of the system if we don't hold them to that standard, but all we really get is pure left versus right gaslighting on real issues and back and forth soap opera. I think a lot of people feel that way. I will say, I think a lot of Americans feel that way. And, I don't know. I wouldn't argue that next to 0% of current elected officials have the qualifications to be running our lives. It depends what you believe those qualifications are. I think that Donald Trump has none at all, like literally no qualifications to be running anything. Clearly not even a business because the man is bankrupt, or his businesses are bankrupt. So, but I do think that there are some elected officials that are doing good work within their capabilities, I'll say. Then the penultimate comment here is the Trump emboldening scumbags thing is real. I've been called an N word 3 times in my life, and all are since he got elected and all here in Utah. However, I find it short sighted to blame Trump or give him credit. It takes away from the root of the problem. The invasive species people here in America have deep seated hatred for us, and Donald Duck scammer's ass, not Donald Duck, is just their excuse to have fun again. This is interesting. Yeah, I definitely don't believe that Trump is the root of American racism. I do believe that Trump and the Trump administration emboldened people that were already racist to be racist out loud. People who previously would not want to be called racist are not necessarily ashamed to be racist, out loud. And I think this was in response to me saying that my mom and I were walking in our neighborhood when somebody just stuck their head out of the window of their car and yelled, "Go home," N words. And that has happened to me before, but I do definitely think that, having a president that incites racial violence is going to cause racial violence and harassment of all kinds. So that's also like, for me, I think that culturally, Donald Trump has had an impact that is inflammatory in so many different ways and taking away from norms that, people take for granted. The fact that he is able to openly speak about wanting to jail political opponents, wanting to use the Department of Justice as his own kind of like party or whatever, it's concerning. It's really concerning because, there could be arguments made as to what degree, of freedom we have in the United States, regardless of who's in power. But Trump's, authoritarian kind of tactics and what he could do if given the White House for another 4 years, it is concerning to me. Then here we have the last comment. The Overton window for abortion has gone super left, believe it or not. Roe v. Wade did nothing to significantly reduce abortions that I have seen. I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, maybe, legal abortions, but I think that less people have been able to access and they've had to go through more in order to access reproductive care. I don't see near the pushback there used to be in the 2010s anymore. And some of the OG main anti abortion activists have died mysteriously. Ah, things like the abortion pill method that aren't even counted in official numbers really help paint a picture with the lack of pushback in popular culture that the left already won that battle. I don't know if we won that battle. See, this one, I don't know if we won that battle. Birth rates are in a death spiral the world over, and literally no one cares. That's just reality. I think the anti abortion people are active. I think that they're active because, and let me tell you why. Because if in 2024, JD Vance and Donald Trump can say things like, they want to punish women who are trying to get abortions, that they'd like to have a registry of women who cross state lines in order to get abortions, then there's definitely a significant amount of people who believe that women should be penalized, potentially legally, for having an abortion. I don't know if we've won that battle. And honestly, I would say that we're actually backtracking because, the fact that we have abortion bans in places like Texas, in places like Georgia, like, you know, de jure speaking, it's not looking great. Although I will say that if you mean that you don't think that the abortion bans affect how many people get abortions, I'd have to look at the statistics on that because yes, just because you make something illegal doesn't mean that people aren't still doing it. They just might do it unsafely and harm themselves. Okay, so that was the end of that comment. That was very interesting. I appreciate people leaving kind of thoughtful comments like that because there's so much discourse about how the YouTube's comment section is garbage, and I want to have a goal of making my comment section be full of, really thinking, for ourselves, explaining our points of view, engaging with curiosity, assuming good intent, and et cetera, et cetera. And maybe eventually I'll have moderators to that end. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to discuss, I'm actually quite frustrated that I cannot that I cannot share my screen. I need to figure out why that is because I wanted to share this article with you guys. Oh, brother. Oh, also, just as a quick aside, the fact that Elon Musk has been doing so much to get Trump elected, I talked about this a little bit last live, but I just think that it's so absurd that Kamala Harris has Beyonce going to rallies and Donald Trump has Elon Musk jumping up and down on a stage. It's okay, here it is. This is the article that I was looking for. It says it's by The Guardian. And it says these 7 states will decide the election. Here's what we learned reporting on the ground. Okay. And then it says, spare a thought for beleaguered Pennsylvanians. During the past few weeks, they have been pummeled. Oh, brother. Okay. Let me start over. Spare a thought for beleaguered Pennsylvanians. During the past few weeks, they have been pummeled with $280 million worth of election ads blazing on their TV and computer screens, part of an eye-popping $2.1 billion spent so far on the US presidential election. Pennsylvania is one of the 7 battleground states that, when it comes to choosing presidents, can seem revered as the 7 wonders of the world. Forget Democratic California, ditch reliably Republican Texas. It is these 7 states that, come 5th of November, will decide the outcome of one of the most consequential elections in modern times. And, we can definitely debate the utility of the Electoral College. I think I don't want to get into that. We can debate the utility of the Electoral College at another time. Their names are seared into the minds of politically aware Americans: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Under America's arcane electoral system, is this written by a British person? The occupant of the Oval Office is elected not through the popular vote, but by electoral college votes harvested state by state. Among them, the 7 states control 93 electoral college votes. Pennsylvania has the largest number, 19, which is why its residents are so bombarded. In the final days, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and their running mates, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, will be all scrambling all over them in a bid to reach the magic number 270 electoral college votes to win. Ay, ay, ay. These states are called battlegrounds for a reason. Their loyalty cannot be taken for granted by either side. This year, though, their unpredictability has reached dizzying heights. The Guardian's presidential poll tracker shows 5 of them essentially tied within a 3-point margin of error, with only Arizona, where Trump is up 4 points, and Wisconsin, where Harris is up 5, pulling away. So, the reason that I wanted to read part of that article is because with the, pollsters doing their work and, kind of showing the inclinations for what might happen with these states, I have seen a lot of people kind of obsessing over the polls and being really concerned about the polls. And I do, want to just say that I really don't think that there's any news outlet that is able to accurately predict what is going to happen in November. And I also like to point out a lot of people comment, and they'll say on like NPR or something, they'll comment, and they'll be like, "Oh, I've never been polled. Like I've lived in America since 1956 and I've never been polled." Well, some of these polls, they poll like 1,000 people. And so it's like, yeah, the margins of error that they have being like, I don't know, 3% or whatever, it's not necessarily indicative It's not a one-to-one kind of thing. So it's like if you're trying to relieve your anxiety by, refreshing on the polls, that's probably not gonna work. I also did wanna point out that one of the swing states, Michigan, was home to the what were they called? The undecided committee that was the uncommitted movement, sorry. The uncommitted movement that was a group of Arab Americans and kind of a coalition of people who were having, you know, using their leverage to essentially get Kamala to make moves on Gaza. And I think that there was 100,000 people who were a part of that movement. I think it's interesting that despite the fact that Michigan is a swing state, Kamala Harris has still stood firm on the kind of Zionist rhetoric around what's going on in Gaza. I don't know if that's tactical. Because, it's interesting that when you see the polling, the New York Times or whatever, that the majority of Americans don't seem to want to, continue providing aid to Israel and are not, supportive necessarily of the war effort, that she would back off. But I guess like the donor class does not represent the majority of Americans. So in that case, it's just unfortunate all around. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight in this article is the section that they wrote. Yeah, see, more than 100,000 Michigan Democrats, many of them from the state's Arab American community around Detroit, abstained from supporting Biden in the Democratic primaries earlier this year because of his support for Israel's war in Gaza. So far, Harris has not significantly wavered from Biden on the issue. With polls this close, it could be decisive if Harris loses a fraction of these votes. Yeah, that's the thing. And I think the thing that's unfortunate about it is that she actually had the opportunity to answer this exact question. What do you have to say to people that say that you're going to lose the election because of the situation in Gaza? And instead of answering the question, she just continued to go forth with the Zionist rhetoric. In fact, let's see exactly. I don't want to get this wrong. What do you have to say? Well, you say that you'll lose the election due to the war in Gaza. Let's get her exact response here. Oh, brother. Should I try screen sharing again? I'll try screen sharing again. I don't think it's going to work, but let us try it. Here we go. This is the window. And I hope you can hear this. All right, let's start from the beginning.
The time about the fact that there are so many tragic stories coming from Gaza. And of course, the first in this phase of everything that has happened, the first most tragic story is October 7th and what happened that day, and then what has happened since. And I think what's critically important as we look at this moment is, one, acknowledging the tragedy of what has happened in Gaza in terms of the extraordinary number of innocent Palestinians who have been killed, and taking that seriously and speaking truth about that. In addition, of course, to what I said about what happened on October 7th.
Okay. That response. That response. Also, I love that she says speaking truth about that. Honestly, if we're being completely honest, the White House has done nothing but lie and diminish since this situation has started. And October 7th. Talking to those, White House staffers, the way that they respond to some of these questions from journalists has been so just condescending. And it's like, do they think that we're dumb? Do they literally think that we're dumb? No, no, because some of the ways that they answer the questions, even like, wasn't Biden the first to basically say that the death toll was not accurate because it was, from the Hamas run health ministry? Even the death I question, and this is just my, thinking about it, but I genuinely question whether or not the death tolls, this like 40,000 number, um, that we keep coming back to is even accurate. So it's interesting that she says that she talks about that often, the situation that's happening in Gaza. I'm like, is that what you talk about often? Because I've heard you talk about often how Israel is our best friend and how the interests of the United States are the interests of Israel. Listen, it's cause and effect, and I think it's interesting. What's the most interesting to me about this kind of viewpoint of American foreign policy is that it really does not help American citizens that the United States is constantly in the background and actively supporting the terrorism that Israel rots on the entire region of the Middle East. And you know why it doesn't help American citizens? Because the kind of sentiment that grows amongst the people that is being killed by the tens of thousands whose homes are being destroyed, schools being destroyed, hospitals being destroyed. That sentiment is one of extreme resentment, not just for the Israelis, but the Americans that fund them. And so, what does that result in at home? Even if you don't care about the human rights issue, you have to understand that that kind of anti American sentiment manifests itself, right, in the terrorist attacks that we see, on the United States. And that's exactly what happened with 9/11. And it's interesting because it's like, when are we going to learn our lesson? You cannot go to somebody else's country and bomb them and expect that nothing is going to happen. The only question is when the other shoe will drop and when the attacks on Americans, if you will happen. It's not a question of if, because it's interesting. Even Israel, killing. We're supposed to be, jumping for joy because they're killing Hamas leaders. It's like you killed 40,000 people. How was Hamas created in the first place, right? Was Hamas not created as a resistance to the Israeli occupation? So your response to a group that's created as a resistance to Israeli occupation is that you're going to actually grow the occupation. You're going to double down. You're going to kill 40,000 more people. How many I'm sorry. It's hard to understand if you're actually trying to solve the issue, but I think my issue is that I'm thinking logically that somebody would want to solve the issue, and maybe that's not what's the goal is. But it's like when you kill 40,000 people, you are giving uh, just opportunity for them to be recruited, right? And what's interesting is that Americans have this kind of cultural idea of, of I'm going to defend my land, I'm going to defend my house, I'm going to defend my private property. You step on my property, I'll shoot you immediately, da 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 kind of thing. And it's like, if you really believe that, then you would understand why Palestinians take up arms to fight Israeli occupiers. And you would understand that if your brother, your mother, your sister, your dad, entire families killed, if that had happened to you, you wouldn't just sit and wait to die? It's absurd, the kind of discourse that goes on in the mainstream media regarding this issue. It really is. And yeah, her response on that wasn't great. I hope you guys were able to hear that. I did watch the rally yesterday with Beyonce. Although I didn't see if there was a performance. Was there a performance? I am not entirely sure. I saw that the lines were quite long. I thought it was interesting. The music that they play, man. They need to get a DJ for these kinds of events because it's actually very strange that they always play like "This Is My Fight Song," or they'll play like "The Man" by Taylor Swift, and it's just like, okay. I mean, I think they played Glorilla, so that was an interesting turn of events. Let me see here. There was also also I made a note to briefly discuss the Washington Post and the fact that the Washington Post will not be endorsing a presidential candidate for the first time in like 20 years or something. Allegedly, that decision was made straight down from Bezos. Oh, Bezos. Yes, this is the problem with having super rich billionaires is that they meddle in the democracy for everybody. So the fact that he was able to do something like that is quite absurd. And I think, it's interesting because Jeffrey Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Elon Musk have all so Jeffrey Bezos made sure that the Washington Post wasn't going to endorse Kamala. Elon Musk has been actively campaigning for Trump, and Mark Zuckerberg said when there was the assassination attempt on Trump that Trump was like super badass or something like that. Like he said, like, oh, the way that he put his fist up was so badass or whatever. And I'm just like, is it a surprise to anybody that the, like, Silicon Valley oligarchs are supporting another oligarch? When Elon Musk came on X, if you want, when Elon Musk came on Twitter to say that he supported Donald Trump, I was like, You didn't need to actually say this, like, we knew." If anyone who has been following you or even hearing about you in the zeitgeist knows that you have these conservative, very weird, deeply chronically online conservative takes. The kinds of stuff that this man retweets, he's worse than J.K. Rowling. And so, yeah, when he came out with that, I was just like, but I will say I didn't know that the Washington Post actually endorsed people and candidates. I'm like, does the New York Times do that? Like, does the Guardian do that? I thought that that was interesting because, like, the New York Times, it has all this stuff about like independence and not, capitulating to either the left or the right. So I do think that it's interesting, you know, that the Washington Post normally does endorse a candidate. Although in their article, the Washington Post article where they said that they in fact were not endorsing a candidate, they did say that staffers wanted to endorse Kamala. So I guess that's them saying that they will without actually saying that. But yeah. Anyway, that is all I have for today. If you are watching this, you should go watch my new video that I made on how the US took over the world. That's why I'm so low energy. I'm just tired because that it didn't actually take that much editing. It took maybe let me add it up because I write down how long it takes me to edit. So 2 hours, 1 hour 30, that's 3 hours 30, 2 hour, that's 5 hours 50. Okay, it took like about 6 hours to edit, I think, ultimately. And, you know, I normally try to, before that, I tried to work on, writing the script at least an hour a day. So that is what you can watch right now if you'd like. I appreciate you coming to the live. And by the way, like the live. I don't know where the like button is. Oh, like the live. And thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. See you next Saturday. Goodbye.